Hello, I'm Chris Cahill, part of the product marketing team here at Revenera, and welcome to this special Best of Soft Summit session focused on SaaS monetization. We're currently gearing up for the 20th anniversary of Soft Summit, and we've covered lots of ground over the years, providing practical advice on all things software monetization. But it's fair to say that our sessions on the transition to SaaS have been among the most popular in recent years, which is why we've compiled these highlights so you can hear some key takeaways from industry experts who've been on that journey as we prepare for the 2023 edition of Soft Summit, where we're going to dig into this topic a little bit deeper. So without further ado, please allow me to introduce Revenera's Senior Vice President and General Manager, Nicole Segerer, in conversation with Margaret Moran, who is the Senior Director at Infor.
What advice would you give companies that are just starting out on a journey on monetization and software delivery? What are the things that they should get right? And what are the things that you benefited from on your journey?
Sure. So the way back when, you look at a license key and you look at delivery, and we found you, and it was, everything was on-prem. So we are working through licensing. You get your delivery model and you've got your keys and you think everything's fine, and everything was. It's a fabulous tool and we've been using it for a long time. Then SaaS comes around, then multi-tenant comes around, then concurrent users come around, and we really realized that we needed a tool. We started with the F9 group that we could expand out because the business expanded in multiple ways, and none of them we wanted to go away. Today, we don't want any of those ways to go away. We just want to expand them. So when we focus in on the F9 group, it was unique in the fact that we had a tool that was old and we wanted to replace it. And it's more of a transaction business. So it gave us the ability. We went out and said, okay, what do we need to do where we can have a tool that works for all of those things that I talked about: on-prem business, SaaS business, concurrent business. And we really changed those licensing models. But as we talked about that, we realized that we really needed to look at the monetizing that as a service, loading things on PCs, and then people asking, how are we going to, we need to load it on a new PC, and how do you track those licenses? The new tool, which we're going to talk a little bit more about, I'm sure you're going to ask me some more questions on that, has really given us the ability to do all of those things and do it in a way that is much more compliant oriented, and the ability that we can track what we're doing and the monetization of it. To be honest, we have seen a huge increase. For us, we believe it is. It's close to, we believe, 4%. We'll know more about in another year of where that is on just licensing revenue that we were losing based on the keys we were using, and now we're not.
That's actually a great number, especially as you are getting it so quickly, Margaret, right? So I think there were benefits in both stopping leakage or addressing leakage, but then also by implementing new models. You talked about concurrent, by actually increasing revenue. Is that right? And then how are you mentioned SaaS as part of your journey. How are you looking at SaaS at Infor, right? How quickly are you doing that transition, and how does SaaS fit into the overall concept of how you're driving monetization?
But we're a SaaS first company. And we've got double-digit year-over-year growth. So we're very excited about that, and as it moves forward. And that had some challenges. One, and that we're still working with, is how do we move people and migrate them and look at their licenses from that on-prem model to that SaaS model. And then, so on an on-prem model, you multiple licenses that we may be bundling. And then, as SaaS first started, it's like, well, we just put a bundle together, we license that, and then off you go. And then all of these things happen. And so from a development standpoint, we just have fabulous development here at Infor, looking at those new features on how they fit together, how are you licensing your tech stack that goes with your application stack? And do they license together? Do we license them separate? And how to build those models as well. So the licensing tools become very, very important. And then now we can go into container licensing. So now we've got that next step, and how do we bundle that? And those are things that's kind of the next thing. We talk about SaaS, and now we're looking at container, they're in the middle of it, licensing, but it's another avenue that gives us the ability to bundle that are customized to clients. So we must keep the client at the forefront, and they're going to have on-prem things, they're going to have SaaS things. Now, how do we bundle that from a licensing perspective? Because we can make the software, developers are great, but keeping it where we can license it, make some money off of it, that's what we're here for, to use those tools properly to give us the ability to do that.
Yeah, and I think what you're talking about is a situation that many companies in the audience have too, right? So the software world isn't flat, it isn't always that simple. There's different deployment models, and the more that you can bring some of your data and processes together in the background, the more you benefit by not having a disjointed organization at some point.
Margaret shared some great insights on Infor.'s journey to becoming a SaaS-first company and the benefits of centralizing their back office systems. And following on from that, we have Revenera's Director of Product Management, Scott Neiman, on how to create a single source of truth for your entitlement and fulfillment data.
And so what we promote is basically the first thing you should look at doing is trying to break down those silos and really focus in on the entitlement aspect of that, right? And so what we say is integrate the entitlement and fulfillment data. Now, why that's interesting is because if I had a single source of truth for all my various different products, and whether it's SaaS and on-premise, whether it's a subscription, perpetual, or usage-based model, based on my customer's interaction through that fulfillment, the entitlement system is capturing records of what they're doing, and that's giving me the usage insights. And that is the data that I'm reporting on. I'm hooking up my business intelligence solution to pull the data out and doing all kinds of various analysis on my customer base. And I'm doing it from a single source, right? I'm not building an integration, pulling in all kinds of different data sources, because the entitlement and fulfillment data are now within a single system. So how do I get to that point? Well, one of the things that we see often is, a misconception on how entitlement management should be managed in the SaaS application. We actually see in some cases that it's managed within the SaaS application itself. So that becomes another disparate system of record than say some of their on-premise. So you want to have a single entitlement system. So focusing on the product catalog. The product catalog basically, it defines the products you sell, right? The capabilities that you sell. And so you may have a product, and in those capabilities, for example, in a SaaS product, you may have different variants of that SaaS product. It may be, take a simple example, you may have a silver edition, a bronze edition, a platinum edition. And the capabilities of that product define, which version of that is. And so if you focus in on really creating a deployment agnostic product catalog, the idea is that you want to have a common catalog because that information is going to be pushed into the entitlement system from the order system. So take example, a typical order system, you're getting orders for various product lines, and you want to have a common interface in how that entitlement will look and feel, right? An entitlement itself is agnostic to the deployment model, right? An entitlement says you own this. This is how long you own it for. And this is the things you can do. This is the products that you own. Whether it's SaaS or whether it's an perpetual, it's truly agnostic of that in the sense of the whole flow here. The order system knows what you bought, but from the entitlement system, basically it's creating, the rights to use something, and then the client technology, whether it's a SaaS or on-premise application, will do the fulfillment piece of that. And they do it in a very similar way. So if you can, through APIs, essentially create one common layer to have various order systems speak into the single entitlement system, you'll be able to get the usage insights. Now, Additionally, you can streamline the order side of it. That may be a bigger deal depending on your organization, because that could be, taking something like Salesforce and trying to, Salesforce, NetSuite, and various other products and coming to a single product may be a much bigger deal. But there's advantages to that too, right? I mean, you could streamline everything from the order process to the renewal process, right? So you could see in this whole process, the licensing and entitlement management aspects really play a role in the fulfillment. They help with revenue recognition. There's some tracking capability, especially with software delivery on-prem related products. And then the usage management and that data giving you insights into the entire renewal process.
We all know how crucial customer retention is to annual recurring revenue. So the more usage insights you can glean, the better prepared you'll be for that renewals process. And now we're going to hear from Extensive CEO Toby Martin, as he tells Revenera's VP of Product Management for Software Monetization, Vic DeMarines, how usage intelligence empowered his team to make the transition from on-premises software to SaaS.
So looking at this at the time, and we started this journey 3, maybe 4 years ago, when it was sort of a twinkle in the eye of staff. A lot of it was around, at the time, everyone wants to be a SaaS company. The annual recurring revenue monetization models are far superior, far more predictable, and make it much easier to build the business long term. At the time, we thought, well, are customers going to want to do this? The answer was customers were already wanting to do that. So at the same time, this is a little bit of serendipity. The customers were saying, we don't really want to buy software as sort of a capital expense. We want to have it as an operating expense. So again, following the thread, we're seeing monetization models change. At the time, we better know what the customers are doing because of the information provided to us with Revenera. And so we started looking at customer demand, which again took us to the SaaS model. So that's the longer piece of sort of the journey that we had of saying, here's this great stuff we had, and our customer renewal rates were out of this world. I would love to have churn rates today as high as my renewal rates were on my annual maintenance. We thought the customers loved us. But what we didn't know is, why did the customers love us? Which features were more compelling to them and which were delivering the higher order value, let alone the configuration. So when I mentioned earlier the 1,256 different things that we had to deal with, we had 4 code bases that were doing very similar things. Because of this, because of moving to SaaS, it's actually allowing us to shrink that by 75% and go down to a single code base. So unfortunately, all of our hair fell out trying to figure out how to deal with having 4 code bases that were largely redundant. But now moving forward, we're talking about a single code base with a fraction of the number of lines of code, with automated testing, and with the ultimate delivery method to the customer, faster uptime, again, no capital expenditures, strictly, it's an OpEx. You put it on a credit card, and that's the predictability, knowing lifetime value, customer acquisition costs, churn times new acquisition, and we can very precisely figure out what our long-term forecast is. So this was the nirvana, as I said, of subscription that was brought about not just because of us, but because of the customer's desire and the shifts that were taking place in the market at the time. So what I would say to anyone looking to begin this journey is starting with data is always the best place to begin. We all know this, data-driven decision-making, things like that. You have to be careful of inductive versus deductive reasoning. Are we starting with data and working to a conclusion, or are we starting with a conclusion and working backwards to data? So for us, the beginning of that journey was to look at an established customer base that we just simply didn't have that relationship with. We had 200 and some thousand active seats of software. There is no way that we were talking to all these people, because some were give us $120 once a year for some plugins, up to hundreds of thousands of dollars for software for compressing satellite imagery. So we didn't have that. Why are people buying from us? We were making money. We were making our numbers. It was fantastic, but we couldn't track it back to root cause. By putting in usage intelligence, that allowed us to track it back to that root cause. And ultimately, whether the customer base knew it or not, they were driving our roadmap rather than us driving that roadmap with data. That's the big sort of evolution of these things. In looking long-term at where usage intelligence comes in, it's really much more about understanding that, the reinvention, but ultimately what we're all here for is to deliver customer value to ensure those long-term relationships where we can monetize what we're doing and where the customers gain an enhanced value out of the platforms that we're providing. So that's why software monetization, be it Revenera or be it what each of us are doing in our own places, is so helpful, because there are many ways to go about this. And what we found was too often we were just running around picking up nickels, but we weren't paying attention to the dollars or the pounds or the euros. And that was the piece where data drove that innovation, largely based on that long-term plan of how do we make more money using what we've got while getting efficient and trying to keep our cost of goods sold, headcount costs, things like that, at a reasonable amount to deliver quality.
Hey, Toby, just a quick question, because it sounded like you said about 3 years ago you started that journey, but it sounded like it was pretty laser focused. Was that competitive pressure? Was that board pressure? Was that your own sense of the business was moving that way? What was the key drivers for that?
Stellar question, Vic. I would say it was absolutely competitive pressure is one, and it was board pressure was two. The inability to forecast and necessarily do cause and effect of, well, why did we exceed our numbers in this P&L or in this business line? We couldn't give a root cause answer. So it was an existential challenge that if we couldn't answer that, we were going to go off and invent something we thought was genius, but may not have had the actual data to support it. So prior to making the investment, and when I say investment, it's a significant portion of the company is working on that side. We needed to make sure that the math was suitable. So that was absolutely board level visibility, definitely competitive pressures. But one of the greatest pieces that I mentioned was our customers were coming to us and saying, like, I don't want to have a server. I don't want to have to do the same things that I do to use your tools. How can you help us with this? Mm-hmm. So it was really sort of three sides of that, which is always nice to have support from all three sides: customers, data, and internal.
I highly recommend watching all of Toby's presentation if you're embarking on a transition from on-prem to SaaS, as he has great insights into market trends and how usage data can inform your roadmap decisions for customer success. Speaking of which, here's Scott Neiman in conversation with Revenera's Principal of Product Marketing, Michael Goff, on how to address customer expectations in a SaaS world.
Which brings us to customer success. Now, when I started here, we didn't really have a customer success organization. Right? You could say 8 years ago, it wasn't, you didn't hear about it quite as much, but we did have a organization that helped our SaaS-based customers. I think we called them technical account managers at the time. This has come probably the most major organizations in our business is customer success. Because in this type of environment where you have something that's running 24/7, that's constantly changing, that potentially could have outages, right? It's good for you to give your customers somebody that they can continually communicate with, that can communicate them changes that are coming down the line to help them prepare. So they've been a valuable resource. So they're a valuable resource to me personally in relaying customer, customer expectations and potential issues to our, the product and engineering organization, so that we're better able to adapt and deal with those in our day-to-day planning. So that has been key for us. And then there's, of course, bringing.
Actually, Scott,
go ahead. Yeah,
I'll just jump in for a sec. So, I mean, and that's sort of like a really central point to sort of these customer expectations in the SaaS world. People are using SaaS applications, and if you're an on-prem vendor, you need to sort of rise to those expectations of people who have experience, consuming SaaS applications. And, we've sort of seen this change from customer support to customer success, a more reactive approach to a more proactive approach, because that's what customers are expecting. So I think you're right. I think that whole customer success piece of it is something that organizations making that transition from on-prem to SaaS really need to consider, even with an on-prem application, that these are the expectations that exist and that you're going to need to rise to and build your organization up to support.
Right. And it's become its own organization, right, outside of support, which I think is very key, right? So it's its own function. It has its own purpose. Works alongside support, works alongside product and engineering. So that's very key. So of course, in the SaaS world, it's bringing continuous value as business value to your customers on a constant basis. And then you may have heard this a bit if you attended Brent's session. This idea of data and insight to that data. And in this type of world, it's pretty much expected from an end customer perspective, you're giving them some type of information on either license consumption. If you have some type of usage model, you want to be able to show how much they're using based upon, how much that they've contractually obligated for each month, so that there's no surprises up front to either them or to you.
Communication is key, and proactively engaging with customers, particularly in terms of usage reports, will help forge those long-term partnerships. And now we turn to Linda Johnson, Software Marketing Director at Agilent, as she outlines the advantages they've experienced since enabling subscription-based product lines.
So we've realized some benefits for doing this for our customers. We're enabling them to have an easy way to consume our software, which is new and different and very well received by our customers. The other thing is we're reducing the cycle time from ordering to consumption from days to minutes, which is pretty nice. And we're also giving our customers the visibility of what they purchased, which is something new that they've never had the ability to do before. And for us, cost savings through electronic delivery. So we are an instrument company, right? So we are shipping software right now as if it were an instrument. So we ship it as a physical thing. So with this integrated process, allowing electronic delivery is going to allow us to realize a lot of cost savings. Speed to market through centralized, consistent solution. And as I mentioned, our customers' feedback is that we have a lot of different solutions. So if we have a common way of licensing, that can just be put into any of the products, and it really saves a lot of development time for our product lines. And then finally, technical controls for software entitlements is going to keep a lot of revenue leakage from happening and also give us essential IP protection. So let me show you the different components of what this looks like. So this is a block diagram of the entire solution. So over here on the left-hand side, customers can come to agilent.com and order products from here. Or what most of our customers still do is get a quotation from a salesperson and then give us a PO, and that is then booked as an order. After the order is booked, that transactional information is then sent to the F&O cloud server. That information is such things as account, user ID, and then also entitlement information. The entitlement is then created and is created as essentially the order number. So we have a good tie between the original order and the entitlement. Once the entitlement is created, an email is automatically sent to the customer, of course, with this information, and then also granting them access back to that F&O cloud portal so that they can download their software. Once the software is downloaded, they put the entitlement ID into that common license layer, and with one single click, is able to go ahead and use their software. And of course, this is a closed loop system, so all of this information travels back to the F&O cloud server, back to our ERP system, and then becomes visible to our customer at agilent.com. What we really like about this process is that it replaces a current manual, physically shipped process, which has probably about 10 human touch points and takes anywhere from 3 to 5 days. Now with this integrated process, we have 2 touch points. And when I say estimated 5 minutes, we're being quite generous. It can literally happen instantaneously.
Faster delivery, increased visibility, reduced costs. There's a lot to love about Agilent's centralized approach to subscriptions. And as we begin to wrap up this retrospective, let's back in with Scott and Michael as they discuss 3 key requirements when moving to SaaS.
We see, especially for those that are just starting this journey, that there's a question on how they're going to manage these SaaS contracts, these SaaS entitlements, so to speak, because they're coming from a world where maybe they're doing things in a CRM solution like Salesforce. They have their customer, they understand what their customer owns, and then, potentially they're subscribing a license to that customer, right? There's a very on-premise focused type model they have today. And that may, and especially if it's a perpetual model, not only moving from perpetual to subscription, but even maybe consumption, but also the SaaS, we've seen some folks try to manage that separately from what they're doing on-prem wise, right? The issue with that is then you have 2 different systems that are managing your SaaS entitlements as well as your on-premise type entitlements. And then you have disparate systems of data. You got to pull that data in to create that single view of usage across your customer. It's doable, obviously. But, what we tell customers is that if you can, in your system of record today for entitlement, whatever that may be, you should be able to capture those different deployment models that you're offering your customer in a single system, really for the purposes of insight and reporting, right? So when we say insights, that's data, but that also means you're reporting on that data, because that data is potentially billable data. That data is usage data, so you can understand how they're using the products and to make other and further monetization decisions beyond, into the future. And so having those things centrally just makes a lot of sense from that perspective, if that can be done. And then the subscription lifecycle. So what I like to say about the subscription lifecycle, it's not just about moving from on-prem to subscription. You want the usage data to understand if your customers are getting value early upfront in the subscription cycle, so that there are no surprises when it's time to renew, right? So it's not just about managing renewal, it's about managing the onboard to make sure they're getting value. And then who helps with that? That's the customer success organization, to make sure they're getting the value immediately. So that's all about, staying close to the customers to understand their usage, right? Which we feel is a very important aspect.
There have been some common themes throughout these highlights, and making data-driven decisions has been chief among them, particularly when it comes to understanding customer behavior and being proactive in your communication. So to close this out, let's hear some more from Toby Martin as he imparts some words of wisdom for those who may be at the early stages of their journey to SaaS monetization.
So in conclusion, I'm a big person in quotes, and best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. The second best time is today. For people that are beginning this process, it's not too late. Of course, I would have preferred to start it a year or 2 earlier. You will probably say the same thing in a couple of years. But the process around understanding customers, understanding monetization, and investing in this shift is something I would suggest starting with forthwith, like today, if it's not already on the path. If you're looking at this as strictly means about monetization, but not looking at it through the customer success lens, I would say that may be slightly myopic. If you're looking at this as, I just want to reinvent my products and monetize them the same way without looking at SaaS and annual recurring models, I think you're leaving some things on the table. So to me, it's an opportunity for all of us that's being foisted upon us, not just by different monetization models, different platforms, but also in the world we live in today. More people are remote. They have to be able to collaborate easily. They have to be able to work online together. And if your software, like some of our legacy software, is based on servers, inside firewalls, VPNs, things like that, it makes it difficult to get that data, and it makes it difficult to reinvent yourself to provide that value. So I looked at it very much as an existential concern for us at the time. And thank goodness we did, because otherwise we'd be having this conversation a couple years from now when the world could be slightly different.
Thanks for joining us for this roundup on SaaS monetization. If you would like any advice on your transition to SaaS, please reach out to us at Revenera, and our software monetization team will be happy to help with your journey. Speaking of which, be sure to sign up for Soft Summit 2023, taking place April 18th for our European audience and April 20th in North America. We have some great sessions lined up on expanding SaaS and monetizing the long tail of on-prem software, growing recurring revenue with intelligent devices and IoT, managing IP risk and reducing revenue leakage, and much, much more. So register today and join your peers and other industry experts as we celebrate 20 years of software monetization thought leadership. Thank you for watching, and thank you to our speakers from previous years, Toby, Margaret, Linda, Michael and Scott. I'm sure they've got you warmed up for more hands-on real-world insights at Soft Summit 2023. So we'll see you there.